Echoes of the Eye is a DLC that never really tells you that it exists. But like with all things Outer Wilds, it's always out there waiting for you to discover it. For me, it was quite a while into my playthrough, when I was a bit unsure about how to progress the main story, that I scoured Timber Hearth for anything I might have missed. I'd been around the planet countless times already, so when I stumbled across the radio tower, I was genuinely confused that I hadn't noticed it before. Looking at the pictures and listening to the recording, I couldn't immediately tell what it was pointing towards. But when it finally clicked, every hair on my body stood up. A 7th planet? After playing the game for about 20 hours at this point, you're telling me there's a 7th planet I haven't found, let alone explored? The idea intrigued me so utterly that I dropped everything I was doing and headed straight for the deep space satellite. And there it was. Something was eclipsing the sun. Something I'd never seen before. Was it a planet? Was it a moon?
That's no moon. It's a space station.
When I say that I got chills, I don't mean the type you'd get when you listen to part of a song you really like. I mean the ones you'd get when your entire worldview changes. 'Cause that is what this felt like to me. Let me zoom out for a bit. My playthrough took place during a single weekend. 3 straight days of nothing but eating, sleeping, and playing Outer Wilds. So, safe to say, when I say it felt like my entire worldview shifted, it really did. Landing my shuttle and taking my first steps into the stranger, the ambience felt foreign. At this point, I was very familiar with the sounds of both the Nomai and the Harthians, but this was neither. And when I scanned the text by the entrance, I realized that this wasn't Nomai writing at all, but evidence of an entirely different species. At that point, I was half convinced that I'd developed a skin condition from how often I kept getting chills. But after figuring out the light mechanic, I experienced the biggest one of them all, as I was introduced to the interior of the stranger. The instruments here were unlike anything ever used by the Nomai, meaning that they probably never even crossed paths. A species in this galaxy, in our galaxy, that had never interacted with the Nomai or us Harthians. Had they just arrived, or had they been here for far longer than I could even dare imagine? The music that plays floating around the stranger, the river, lasts for the exact duration of a full raft ride. It reminds me of the music of Timber Hearth, that is exactly as long as the day cycle of the Harthians' homeworld. To me, this connection signals that, like Timber Hearth is to the Harthians, the stranger is the homeworld of this foreign species. But that, as I would soon come to learn, was not the entire truth. As I explored the stranger, I learned the story of its inhabitants. After receiving a signal from the Eye of the Universe, they uprooted their entire civilization from their home moon in order to reach it. Much like the Nomai, who abandoned logic and safety alike when they warped towards the eye, many of them dying in dark bramble, the strangers paid a catastrophic price for their curiosity. They didn't just leave their homeworld, they stripped it of every natural resource it had, rendering it completely uninhabitable, all for the sake of reaching the eye. As this realization settles in, the first Seekers begins to play. Establishing the strangers as the first species to ever respond to the eye signal and becoming the very first link in the chain of events that would one day allow me to reach it. When the strangers finally reached the eye, they were met with a vision, one of total annihilation. The eye would not offer them salvation. It would end their species, along with the rest of the galaxy. They had destroyed their home for nothing, and the dream of reaching the eye that they'd sacrificed everything for was a literal dead end. Terrified and enraged by this truth, the strangers turned against the eye, burning their church and all scrolls that documented their connection to it. They even constructed a device that sealed the eye and silenced its signal across the universe so that no one would ever interact with it. Refusing to accept what they had seen, the strangers retreated into simulations of their homeworld, choosing to live out the rest of their existence in a memory of what they'd lost. But as the years passed, one stranger refused to accept this decision. They believed it was unfair that their species' fear, their rejection of the inevitable, should rob others of the chance to choose for themselves. So they left the simulation, shut down the seal, and allowed the eye to transmit its signal once more. But the rebellion was short-lived. They were discovered, imprisoned, and the eye would be sealed away once again. But what the strangers never realized was that during that brief window, when the eye was allowed to transmit once more, it reached an alien vessel many galaxies away. The Nomai. We learn all of this through the slideshows that are accompanied by music that reflects the emotion experienced by the strangers. I already mentioned the first Seekers that plays when we are shown their discovery of the eye and their journey to our solar system. You can really hear the almost childlike wonder and excitement, along with the hopeful curiosity that would push them to abandon their home and chase something which scope they didn't fully understand. And when we see them uncover the true nature of the eye, the premonition plays. It starts out relatively calm as the strangers approach the eye, but towards the middle of the piece, it becomes twisted and distorted, reflecting the horrifying reality they had found themselves in. My personal favorite is A Dream of Home. It plays as the strangers retreat into their simulations, reminiscing of their homeworld and mourning what they've lost. It's an unexpectedly beautiful piece, especially given their circumstances. But towards the end of the piece, the music begins to fracture, almost glitching before transitioning into something colder and more hollow. After many journeys to the stranger, I finally have all the information necessary to free the prisoner from their captivity. And upon freeing them, they share their story with me, showing the cruel fate that they suffered for going against their species' fear of the inevitable. And in exchange, I show them what happened after the strangers sealed themselves away. I show them the decay of the stranger, the slow extinction of their species. But I also show them how their brief act of defiance allowed the Nomai to receive the eye signal, and how their search carried them to our solar system. As I do, a new rendition of the Nomai begins to play, with instruments usually associated with the Harthians. It then transitions into our story, about how the Harthians, hundreds of thousands of years after the Nomai, took up their search and carried it forward, eventually reaching and entering the eye of the universe. As our retelling comes to a close, we hear the traveler's melody, closing on a quiet trumpet fanfare. Not necessarily a celebration, but rather a confirmation that the prisoner's rebellion mattered. Seeing this, the prisoner shrieks, letting out all their emotion, the pain and the suffering, but also the comfort in knowing that they, in the end, made a difference. And as the prisoner takes his farewell, sound of water starts to play. After hundreds of thousands of years in captivity, they're finally free. Their real body has long since died, but that is of no consequence to them. Their sacrifice was worth it. That is all that matters to them. And the last thing that they'll ever hear is the sound of water as his flame flickers out, along with the final remnant of his species. Thank you very much for watching this video. Once again, the biggest of shoutouts to Andrew Prolo, whose name I think I mispronounced in the last video. His music for Echoes of the Eye somehow maybe even surpasses the incredible music of the base game, which I think is incredible. There are also some tracks on the extended version of the album that I think you should check out. Feel free to share any thoughts, feelings, or whatsoever about Outer Wilds, its DLC, the music, whatever. I simply cannot get enough of this game, and it would be wonderful to converse with you about it. Thank you all again for watching, and have a beautiful rest of your day.